Hello all my JavaScript friends, this is TheVirtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and this is our racing game. Now, I promised you before, or actually I didn't think I promised, but I mentioned that we're going to start the graphics on this video, but we're actually not because, well, once I got to the screen where we had all the graphics, I realized, oh, I forgot to fix up the select cars and the select venue screens. And that would be a very important piece of the puzzle to be able to use those screens before we got to the graphics. So you got to bear with me one more week. We're going to be working on the select cars and the select venue screens. What are those select cars and select venue screens? It is the following. If I click on select cars, this will allow me to select from 2 to 4 different cars. Like for instance, I can select the blue bomber, I can select the yellow racer and the red rocket and the black beauty. And once those 4 are selected, I can then go to select venue. And this will allow me to select whatever venue I'm going to use. In this case, the Sunny Circuit. And then once I click on race, it will go to the race itself, which will have the graphics in it. Of course, right now it doesn't have any graphics in it whatsoever. So that's the key. That's what we're actually going to be looking at today is the select cars and the select venue. Now, I'm still using dummy data in this case. Everything is now loading up correctly, which is what I was going for here. Some of the nitty-gritty details that will be used on the racing screen, which is the very final screen, I'm still not passing over as of yet. That will come with the graphics. I believe the very first thing we're going to do when we present the graphics is show you, hey, you know, all those cars we selected in that venue, which is how we're going to use it. So let's get to it. So luckily, both of the cars and the venues use the exact same type of construction. Each one uses a JSON file, and this happens to be the car JSON file here. You can see the ID, the name, Blue Bomber description. The important thing here is that it's going to have a thumbnail URL. This is going that little thumbnail that showed up on the screen, and a model URL. This will be the GLB that we will load in with the model. Now, right now, as you can tell, all of them have the same model, the Ferrari, and that's because I just have one model right now that I am experimenting with until I can make sure I can get the models working correctly on the cars. That's what the JSON file is. Let's take a look at the select cars HTML. Now, the select cars HTML is very, very simple. We actually have 3 different sections. The first section here is the select screen, the select cars section. That is this section right here. The next section is the section that has all the different buttons on it. That is the middle section right in here where the select and unselect button is. And finally, we have down here at the bottom the selected. It's not the select, but the selected list. And that selected list is the list that appears on the right-hand side. Let me select a couple of cars here so you can see it. Yeah, right there. It's that list right there. So how does all that work together? Well, it's very, very simple. The select cars goes in there. Once the first thing it's going to do is it's going to load in the database. It's going to load in that JSON file, and it's going to load in our database. It's our database controller, which is a singleton method. And I'm doing my singletons different this time. I think this is like the 3rd project I've used where I've done a singleton for a 3rd different way, but I think I'm now finally happy with it, and we'll be showing that here in just a second. It's very, very simple. I'm getting access to all the different DOM elements. I'm getting access, or I'm setting up event listeners on the clicks. I'm setting up the database itself on the car database, and I'm populating the select list. And the population of the select list is very easy too. I'm going through each one of the cars and I'm pushing load card. And load card happens to be a promise because, you know, we're loading files from an HTTP server way out in the boondocks right now. It's localhost, so it's, you know, on my computer. But the idea here is that we don't know when that loading is going to finish. You could have a fast connection, slow connection, whatever. So we're pushing promises and we're using a promise all. And that promise all basically says resolve this promise once every one of the promises within that promise succeeds. So I am hoping that all 8 of my cars will be able to load up both the model and the thumbnail, and we'll show you that here in just a second. And once that is done, I'm going through each one of the cars. I'm creating a button element. I am appending the thumbnail to the button element and appending a span, and that span contains the name of the car. And then I'm appending all that to an LI, and that's what will give you the listing on the left-hand side here. And I've got my CSS here has, you know, a place, you know, where it does it. What does a hover look like? Or when I do a selected, we know what the coloration for the selected looks like, and, you know, that kind of fun stuff. That's not a big deal. So that's what that does. Then we get down to what happens when things are occurring. Like for instance, if select event here is what happens when you click on the select button in the middle of the screen here, and it basically all it really does here is it moves anything that is selected. It moves it from the select column to the selected column, past tense. Select column and a selected column. Yeah, I probably should name all those differently. But that's no big deal here. Unselect is when you click on the unselect button, which moves everything from once you've selected a car on the selected side, which is the right hand side, it will move everything over to, it will move the LI, not everything, it'll move the LI over to the left column or the select column. On-car select is the event handler for when we click on a car on the left side, the select side, and it just, basically real easy. It's basically adds a class, to the car select, and that class is what's used inside the select and the unselect to be able to figure out, oh, I got to move this one way or the other. An on-car selected is what happens when we select the car on the right hand side. So notice the difference. We have the word select and selected. Yeah, I really don't like that. But, hey, we'll fix that later. I'm not worried about that. So that's really all it is to that. It's really very, very simple. That's the only operations that we have here. But I want to spend just a quick minute here on the database itself. The database is basically split into two different sections. One is what I call the data, card data. And this is the card data that we're looking at here. And this basically gives us the format of the data that we're going to use for the car. You can see the ID, the name, the description, and the model URL and the thumbnail URL, and that matches what we see here inside the cars.json. It has two additional fields, model and thumbnail. This is where the binary files or for the model and the JPEG for the thumbnail are going to occur. And this is very simple. I just construct the or populate the private variables. I do getters on all the different private variables to make sure I get everything returned correctly. And I don't have any setters, as you see here, because I want everything to be read only. So there's no setters whatsoever. The big thing here is the load car. It is a promise. It returns a new promise here, and this promise is either going to resolve or reject. And this does also a promise all, because there's two pieces to each card that we need to load in. We're going to have to load in the model, which is a GLB file that Babylon.js will use to physically put the model up on the screen, and that's load model, and then we have load thumbnail, which will load up our image. And we're going to do the promise all just like we did in the select cars. We're going to do the promise all to make sure that both of those pieces of information have resolved. Once they have resolved, then I do resolve. If one of them done resolved, then I reject it. The load model uses a fetch and a response, and I'm saving it right now as an array buffer. I can guarantee you that is not what's going to happen. What will happen eventually is that once we get to the graphics program, we're not going to load up this model until we get to the graphics program and we're ready to pop that model onto the chassis of the car so they can go rolling down the track. So in this particular case here, most likely once that happens, I'm going to be changing load car to be able to sit there and say, let's just do the load model or let's do the load thumbnail and let us do the load model a little bit later. Unless I can have Babylon.js load it from an array buffer. And if it can load it from something that's already in memory, then that's great. Then I'll just change this to whatever Babylon.js needs, and then we're done, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore. But for now, since I don't have the graphics done, I'm just loading it in just to make sure that I can load it in. Then the thumbnail is just used as an HTML image element object. No biggie there. Onload is an event that is fired off, or a callback that is an event that's not an event, excuse me. It is a callback that is called when the image is finished loading. In that case, I set the thumbnail. No, I forgot to tell you that. Once we're all done here, I do say this dot model. This is how that model private variable gets set. And this is the thumbnail for the image that gets resolved. If there is an error, it will do this callback, in which case I do a reject. And that's pretty much all there is to the image element. And this is the standard basic way to be able to load up an element from an HTML element object from within your code. And there's really not a whole lot to it in that case. So that's pretty much all there is on the cars. and that will get us to this particular section here. Let's just race 3 cars. So once I get the once I get 2, 3, or 4 cars in the car selected column, the select venue at the very top appears upon the screen. When I select the venue, this is what we show up. And the venue here is very simple. I can only select one venue, so as I click on it, notice that it changes. You know, Desert Dash, Mountain Pass, Sunny Circuit, everything kind of just changes. And once I click on the race button, we go to that race. And if I click again on one that was already selected, like Sunny Circuit was already selected, if I click on it again, notice that the race button has disappeared. So it does force you to have always one venue selected. So let's take a quick look at the code for the venue. So let's go to our code, and this is the JSON file. Kind of looks familiar, but pretty much it's the exact same type of format as the cars file, just a little bit of extra information. We have the thumbnail ID here. We do have a models and a layout, and the models would be a array that eventually will house, if you want to put model trees on your track. If you really want to go all out this thing, you can put model trees on the track and a model house, and we'll have one thing that we'll put on our layouts when we get to the graphics to show you how all that is done. And then, of course, the layout is the layout. That's the track layout itself, and we've kind of covered that with the track video a couple of weeks ago. And this will contain that array of saying, here's my start line, here's my start anchor, here's my start line, here's my straight track, here's my curve, blah blah blah, here's my finish line, here's my ending anchor. As you can see here, I've got the 3 different venues. Each one's got their own thumbnail ID. And so the select venue HTML is real simple. It's just got a UL in there. This is exactly the same as the cars. It really is not much of a difference. And the select venue JavaScript file does pretty much the same thing. We set up the venue database. We populate the list. We populate the list again with promise all, just like we do with the cars, because we got to know when all of the 3 venues have been loaded up. And when they're loaded up, each one has a span that contains a name, and each one has the thumbnail, which has already been loaded in because we were successful with the promise all, and we append that to the button. The button gets appended to the LI, and we're done at that point. And on venue select, we just obviously sit there and say, hey, if we've clicked on it before, then we want to turn off the venue button. But if this is a new one we've clicked on, then we want to unselect anything that was previously done, and we want to select the current one that we have typed on. And that's it. And what about the databases? It's the exact same thing pretty much as the card database. There's really not a whole lot to go here. Here's the design. You get to specify absolutely everything except for the thumbnail. The thumbnail gets loaded up in the load venue section, which is simply just an image. That's all it is. And it's just the exact same image code that you saw with the car one. And our venue database, and I forgot to show you the car database before. I just suddenly realized. So we'll now show you the venue database, because both of them work exactly the same way. This is my new way of designing not static database, but singleton databases. What is a singleton database, you ask? And if you didn't ask, you're going to know. A singleton database is an object that usually gets instantiated one time, and then it can't get instantiated again. And the whole idea behind that is I'm going to have my database contained within this particular class. And once it gets instantiated, once it gets accessed, basically, I want to load up that database, but then I don't want to have anything to do. I don't want to have any other program do another database, because then I'll have duplicate databases. So I want to be able to use the same database. So by containing the database here on the database object itself, I can control all that. Technically, this isn't a singleton instance, because you do instantiated instance, and I am throwing an error if I do instantiated. I'm using everything in static classes. So that allows me to be able to know for an absolute fact that it will only ever have access to one database, and that one database is located up here. And this works very simple. We do the static set database. In that case, we parse the JSON file, which we load up. I'm going back to the venue. Whoops, wrong one. The select venue here. If we go to the select venue, you can see the loading up right here. This is where I set the database. And yes, I'm doing a JSON stringify of the venues and then using a JSON parse within the venue DB. And the whole reason for that is that I use Vite, and Vite by default will load a JSON file in and go ahead and parse it out for you. I don't want that. and I know I can probably set up V to say, hey, give me the raw file, but I didn't worry about that at this point. Doesn't really matter. Because the idea here, I got the JSON database, and then I'm going through each one of them, and I'm assigning I am creating the new venue data. This is the venue data that we've created here. I'm creating the new venue data, and I'm storing it in two different places. Well, actually, I'm storing the reference in one place, the ID database and the name database. And this will allow me to very quickly find a venue based upon the ID or based upon name, because once I access these venues, I need to say, oh, here I have an ID for a venue, but it may be that I may for some reason just only have the name. So I want to be able to access the venue either by ID or by name. To call anything within this database, all you have to do, let's go to select value. All you have to do, and you can see it here in the population selection list, is you use the static method, in this case get all venues, and you call everything based upon the static methods. And by doing that, it will automatically access these files up here, the ID database and the name database. And these databases, because I'm loading this as a module, these databases these variables are privatized to this particular module only. No other module within JavaScript can access these particular files. This just used to be the way you would do private variables before there was private variables within JavaScript. By having them outside of the class, you can access them, and as long as they're in the module, and that's the key here, and everything I've got is modules. As long as they're within that module, only that module can access them. So this forces me, or this guarantees me, that I only have one copy of ID database and one copy of name database. And by having static methods, I know I'm not operating on any instance. I'm always going to be operating on the ID here and the name database. I'm always going to be operating on the ID database and the name database. So that was the set database. The get values allows me to get venues. Get all venues allows me just to get all the venues, and I just pass them in a simple array. Here's where I just get the venue by ID. Here's where I get the venue by name. This is why it's so easy and simple. But just since everything's being passed by references, I'm not duplicating a lot of data here. So it's very easy to sit there and say, okay, I'll just keep two different databases so I can have references to them. And then when I do the load venue, I just call the load venue method for a particular venue. Oopsies. There we go. I accidentally messed up there. Let's try that again. All right. So by doing the static values on the databases, that allows me now to only guarantee myself to only have one copy of each of those databases available to me. So I don't care how many programs now uses the VenueDB or the CarDB database, only one is being selected. And that's pretty much it that I wanted to show you here. As like I said, I don't have the graphics fully done yet. So if I select Sunny Circuit and hit on race, this is where the graphics will show up on the screen, the race track and all that kind of fun stuff. And it doesn't show up yet, but that's fine. That's not a problem. So I promise you, I guarantee you, because I'm close, but I guarantee you that I will do the graphics next week. And we're probably going to take about 3, maybe 4 videos to do the graphics, especially dealing with the car. The car was just a major issue trying to get that thing working. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel to view more videos. Click on the like button on this video and visit us at TheVirtuoid.com. Also, support us on Patreon, where you can get access to member-only videos. Links are down below. Again, thank you very much for watching, and keep on coding.